Welcome to the MVP cast from me, Mark Woods. We're brought to you in association with Total Environmental Compliance. Check them out at tecompliance.co.uk. Now, our guest in this edition is a former NBA and EuroLeague big with a singularly unique place in basketball history. He's a serial winner. He claimed league titles in Spain, in Greece, and Poland, cups in Russia, as well as the EuroLeague crown while with Panathinaikos. And he also played for the Orlando Magic and the Phoenix Suns. He is the only Irishman ever to play in the NBA. Our guest is Pat Burke. Pat, welcome to the MVP cast.
Mark, thank you for having me on. I'm honored that you thought of me to have it. It's great to hear that introduction. I wish I could hear that every morning when I get up to motivate myself.
From where do you join us, and how is the pandemic world treating you?
I'd say, like anybody else, my family and I are, getting to know each other day by day with board games and long conversations and walks. And, this being the first time we've all gone through this, it's an interesting time, especially as a father trying to talk to your kids about what's happening and the importance of, keeping social distancing as a priority.
And washing your hands. We can never forget washing our hands, and we won't forget it for a long time to come.
Yeah.
We always get this list at the start of each season. It's all the players from the different nations of the NBA, and then there's the bigger historical list. Emotionally for you, how does it feel to be the one guy who made it to the NBA from Ireland?
Definitely, there's an honor involved in that. From such a small nation where the sport is not as popular, but it is gaining popularity. It's kind of one of those smaller, trivial type things that's in the world. Is people wouldn't know if there was anybody from Ireland, but to be the one is. It's a good feeling, and I don't think I'm the last. I think again, as I shared, that is the popularity is getting to be more interest inside of the sport of basketball because it's such a sport that the Irish love it. It's an indoors, it's fast paced and all that. So I'd say that there are a number of NBA players to come.
I mean, you left with your family at the age of 3 to go to Cleveland. And I don't think I've ever asked you, what was behind the move? How did it come about?
Funny is my parents actually had gone back and forth. This was not the first time that they were going back and forth. The two of them, my dad's from the West, he's from Mayo, and my mom was from Tullamore-Offaly. And so they were actually both out in Cleveland, Ohio, visiting family, and they didn't know each other. They were at one of the Irish cultural clubs at a dance, at a social gathering, and they met each other. And then I think they reconnected when they were back in Ireland, and they got married, moved to the United States, and they had the three oldest of my siblings, and then they moved back to Ireland. And then I had the 3 youngest. I was the youngest of the 6, and they moved back to the States. So I think at that time it had a lot to do with the financial structure of jobs and looking to gain some sort of employment that had some sustainability. So my mom and dad are moving back and forth, and there's a number of factors that play into it because there was family already in Cleveland. So I've never really actually talked to my parents about what was going on at that time that kept bringing them back and forth. But I do know that there was a large group of Irish that were over in Cleveland at the time.
I mean, in growing up, splitting your time, you were in Cleveland, you were in Florida as well, but your dad never really allowed you to forget your roots.
Not at all. Like any Irishman, I don't think that from the meals down at the dinner table to everything as far as social structure in the family, everything was always about Ireland. I can remember wanting to partake in a number of American activities, and it would be, the priority was the Irish, social clubs we were involved in. That was going to take precedence. We're going there first. And it's, I'd really like to go do this thing over here with my teenage American friends. No, you're going to come over here and you're going to do this. So there's just always that influence, and then my parents, of course, having Irish accents. I wouldn't think twice about it, but anytime any of my friends came over, they would act like they didn't understand my mom and dad as if they were speaking some different language. So there was always that, how would I say, that underlying "we're not from here" type feel to growing up.
And that gives you that little bit of superiority over those other Americans who come up to you and go, "Oh, we're Irish too." And you go, "No, I was born there."
I don't know if I would go that far. I'm not going to puff my chest out and prove anything. So I really appreciate the childhood I had and what my parents did to connect me to Ireland, and all the, growing up, the visits and all that. So
when you were growing up, I mean, basketball for you, as I understand it, wasn't really you weren't one of those guys that took to the sport early. I mean, it was relatively late on that you kind of really focused on the sport.
Yeah. Kind of segue into what we were just talking about was my dad's sister, my Aunt Patricia. She came over to visit the house when I was probably about 8 or 9, and her son, my cousin David, she had just signed him up for ice hockey of all sports, and this was like a screeching halt in this Irish American kitchen. Like, what? What have you done? And so she was, kind of really diving into American culture, American sports. And so she asked my mom and dad and myself, "Pat, would you want to do this?" And I could just remember kind of the silence and the uncomfortable, like, awkwardness of, what do we know about ice hockey? So I took on, an active approach to it. Just went in, didn't know anything about the sport, ended up getting a bunch of equipment, understanding the culture of, how to get the skating down, the rules of the game, all of that type of thing. And I enjoyed sports very much. And then, as it turns out, there was a large growth spurt that occurred in my life. Around 13, 14 years old, I grew 7 inches in one summer. And that's when, my life started to change, not because of anything that I was wanting to do with my height, but the influence of people around me telling me, "Hey, you know what you should do?" And I'm just looking at them like, what? And they say, "You should go play basketball." And that was at every turn, every classroom I entered, every shopping mart I went into, everybody was telling me that. And I never had any thought to do it. And so for the first year at that, I was the first real height that I hit that, was kind of stood out. It was at 6'5". That was when I was around 15 years old. And people were telling me that. And I didn't join the basketball team or try out. And then the I would not change as I was 6'7". And now where let's say 4 people a day inside of my school were telling me to do this. Now with the 2 extra inches, now it was doubled. It was 8 people a day were telling me. So then I just listened to them. I said, "I'll give it a shot." And I was miserable. I just, just total fish out of water, just didn't know how to dribble, didn't have any of the skill sets all the other kids had. And I also walked in with a new understanding of, and I wouldn't say it's just American, but with people's expectations. Nobody wanted to listen to the fact that I'd been playing 8 years of ice hockey, and at 6'7", I could skate circles around them and all this and the other. They just expected, because I was 6'7", I needed to be able to play basketball. And when I couldn't, there was a disappointment to them, which it was, at that age, it was very difficult for me to understand, because it's like, you're judging me not on my character or my respect level or my life skills. You're judging me on the fact that I can't put this damn leather ball into a metal cylinder. So.
But you did okay in the end.
And
Not that.
yeah, in the end, yeah, I think I surprised a lot of folks from the early stages of high school and college to at the end of my career. And the introduction you gave me, if anybody is if anybody's from around that time in my life and they heard the introduction, they said that can't be the same Pat Burke.
Oh, you're too modest, too modest. I mean, you ended up getting a scholarship to Auburn, which, for those who don't know, is a big university in Alabama that famously produced Charles Barkley. You come out of there and, you go undrafted, but you have an offer on the table from the New York Knicks to go straight into the NBA. Instead, though, you go to Spain, you sign with Tau Vitoria, big club. Why that decision not to, I guess, take the dream shot for maybe a longer and a more exotic game?
Yeah. It's funny. I tell people that when you're how about I say, the biggest fear youth has is fitting in. That's what someone told me one time, and I have to agree. Is wanting to be like everyone else, and when you join something so late and you're trying to master that skill set, I think I always had that little bit of a doubt that I can't do what everyone else has done. They've had 5, 6, 7, 8 years plus to work on these things. So my agent at the time had talked to me, and I'm sitting there, and Jeff Van Gundy was the coach of the Knicks, and he told me about this offer. And then my agent, who I'd say was very smart, very wise, he broke it down. He said, like you said, he said, look, here's the absolute dream. It's right there. If you want to sign with the Knicks, you can do that. He said, but I have a coach in Spain who likes you very much, and he's going to give you, playing time. You're going to totally transform the way you're playing. And he said, the biggest thing that people are saying about you outside of your size and your athleticism is your best days are ahead of you. And I don't know, I was open to hear it, because thing. It wasn't a knock. It wasn't saying you're not ready. It was saying you're going to improve as time goes on. And so I don't know. That appealed to me more. The idea that I could still become better than what I was like, okay, well, I could do it with this opportunity of going to Europe. And the kind of the vision or the picture painted from my agent of the New York Knicks was, look, there's another Pat that's there. He's an all-star. His name's Patrick Ewing. He's going to get all the playing time, and you're not. And how could you fight that? So I think it's one of those things where when I talk to kids or camps, they're always like looking at me like you're crazy. I would have gone to the NBA. And I said, well, there's a lot of factors to it.
I mean, you're coaching Victoria. Great coach, Sergio Scariolo, of course, being with Spain, won lots of major titles, big Olympic medals, now an assistant with the Toronto Raptors. How did he help you make that adjustment to, I guess, what would have been a very different style of game to what you'd been used to?
Y'all, it's night and day. There's an extreme challenge in talking to somebody about the distinction of something. It's like saying, not to get so deep into it, but it's like saying, if I show my hands and I'd say, which one of my hands is open? And you said this one. I said, how do you know? And you said, because that one's open. Well, I'd say, well, what about because the other one's closed? And the distinction is that you'd have to know the two of them. So I only at that point, Mark, had the understanding of the American game. And the American dream of the NBA was last second shots and alley-oop dunks and just, this excitement of the NBA. And it was a very fast-paced game. When I got to Europe, I'm telling you, I was pissed. I felt like I was hoodwinked a bit because the game was so slow, so strategic, that at 21, 22 years old, a lot of times in practices, I was taking the ball, kicking it in the stands, pretty much ready to go fight with Sergio all the time. He kicked me out of practice a number of times. And I would even talk to my teammates about how this doesn't make sense. And it was it was over a period of time then that when I was talking to my teammates that they would share with me that they were upset by my actions, that what I was doing was a little childish to have taken on the team's time and do these things. And it's funny because over the course of that year, with Tal Ceramica and making it to the finals, and in the end not being it, gone that distance, and I would say that much success with that group of guys that really taught me the understanding of sacrifice. That sometimes you don't think things through to a degree, but that what's influencing you and what's in front of you is, you have to open your mind, and that's what took place. Is I realized, okay, if I give in, if I do what they say, then good things can happen. It's not always what I thought. And so I started to gain that distinction. And that's, kind of leading into the difference I had with the NBA then, as far as going back and actually seeing it with the Magic, and then weighing my option that next year after I was done with the NBA and realizing, do I want to play in Europe, or do I want to play in the NBA?
Did you find that when you went on, because you go on to a phenomenal string of championships with Panathinaikos, 3 straight Greek leagues, winning the EuroLeague as well. How much was that first year, I guess, even more valuable than the time in college in terms of giving you this longevity of career?
Yeah, that I think that is kind of what sprouted then the understanding of what my agent Warren Legary was saying. Like you if you take this, you're gonna change. And so going into Greece, I had a great role on those teams. That first year I was behind Dino Raja, and then I was behind Rebraca. And I didn't mind, the fact was I was going in and producing and getting minutes and sharing in all of those championships. And it was one of those things where my confidence gained to set me up for that final year in Greece with Marousi, to be one of the top players in that league. It was nothing like college. Auburn's success today is nothing like it was in 92, or 97 when I was there. It was, you're working just as hard. The symphony is not producing the same amount of success, but it's still, you're working very hard. Whereas now I was with this other group in Panathinaikos and we're winning. I can still go back and remember when we won that first championship, and I was bawling crying because it was the most success then that I had as far as finally winning something.
Did you feel that, there was a great progression, as you said, over the 3 years with Pana, and you get to that 2000 EuroLeague Final Four, you get through the semis, you're into the final against Maccabi, and that's a great team. You mentioned Rebraca, Dejan Bodiroga, brilliant coaching staff. You beat Maccabi Tel Aviv in that final, but what I remember about that group is it seemed very, very tight-knit. The harmony, it seemed like it was there on and off the court. I mean, was that a really smart and tight roster?
I don't know if the answer I'm going to give you is the one that you're thinking is why. One of the things that happens in Europe, I would say in a very large percentage of teams, is there's a very militant approach to achievement. 2 practices a day, grueling, just putting in. I've often said to people, I would never want to take on the position of a head coach in Europe because they're always proving to the person who's paying them how much they're doing to win, which sometimes you're doing too much. You've got your players that are getting injured. You're doing all kinds of things that are just, it's overkill. So the Panathinaikos teams, especially with the Obradovic years, were grueling in the sense that we were always working. We were always going as hard as we could. There's no way later on in my career I could have been there because the practices were so hard, I would have been injured. The coaching is almost. Hold on one second. Can you do me a favor? Can you take Mabel out of here and close the door? How would I say this? When you're all going through so much adversity, then it happens that everybody kind of pulls together and it's much easier, if that makes sense. So it's like we could have had guys who had no type of relationship at all, but since they were all going through the same grueling workouts and all of that, next thing you know, they're bonding a little bit faster. And I think that's one of the differences, that there's a balance there. That I didn't see that in the NBA, but I definitely saw it in the European basketball. Is if you sacrifice enough, I don't care what's your attachment in your life, of all your life experience, your religion, your background, your cultural differences, you go through enough adversity and it all drops. The next thing you know, you're just a human next to another person and you're just tired and you're relating in that way. And that would kind of summarize Panathinaikos to me as like it's ultimate sacrifice. And you start off in the very beginning, you don't know anybody, you don't know any of the guys in the team. Then you start fighting the guys on your practices because you're working so hard. Then after a while, you're fighting other teams. You're joining your brothers in arms because you're fighting other teams. And now you're relating to them. And now there's no difference in any one of you because you're all wearing the same brand or uniform, and you'd fight to death for anybody who stepped up in your brother's way. And then at the end of the year, when you've won something, you've just put something stamped that year and said, look, that's the year you won this. And those are your brothers for life. You know, I've got some teammates that are as close as my siblings, because just what we all went through and what we achieved together.
When you look at playing in Athens, I mean, obviously there's that incredible rivalry between Pana and Olympiacos and the other teams, AEK, that are there as well. And is it a pressure cooker situation to be a player within that city? I mean, you're out and about because, you know, half the city loves you, half the city treats you as the mortal enemy. What's it like to be in the middle of that?
I'd say the situation is the pressure happens on game day. You know, the buildup is more for the fans, and the newspapers after the game's over is for the fans as well. But game day, obviously, is when the most takes place, you know, during the game. And it's no experience I've ever had would ever equal anything like that. Seeing, you know, from people actually throwing things and being involved in the games and screaming and flares and fires going on and all that rioting, you know, based on, again, it's to look at it so strange, but it's like to say, look, we're acting out a made-up game that James Naismith put 2 peach baskets, wrote up some rules, and these people are so emotional they're trying to kill each other, not really because of the game itself, but the representation of Olympiacos and Panathinaikos, like, you know, the red and the green. And it's you're just really an excuse to have a conversation or an excuse to have a fight.
And sometimes both.
Yeah, sometimes both. And then afterwards, it's like, you know, let me go buy you a beer. You know, but yeah, I've never experienced anything like that.
I mean, you went on, you know, to play in some great situations. You were in, you know, Madrid with Real and winning the Euro Cup and the ACB, and, you know, Khimki Moscow and in Russia and Procom towards the end of your career in Poland. When you're traveling a lot, obviously playing particularly European competition, but what's your favorite arena to go into, and what was your absolutely least favorite place to have to go to?
Can you repeat that again, Mark?
Yeah, with all the travels that you had, what was your favorite arena to go to, and what was the place that you dreaded having to go into?
Dreaded. I don't know. I mean, I don't mean to to be so, I don't know, simplistic about this, but I loved all of it. I don't think I had a place where I dreaded going in. I enjoyed all 9 years in Europe because, you know, I didn't really truly appreciate it till I got older and looking back at it and saying, wow, you visited so many different cultures. You know, you got to meet so many different people, experience so many different types of leadership. You know, that's one thing. I had some of the most grueling coaches at times, but now looking back, I appreciate having that experience. Now, at the time, I didn't like what they were doing, but I appreciate understanding what they were doing and why they were doing it and looking back. Teammates, you know, seeing players, obviously, like Dejan Bodiroga, you know, Johnny Rogers at such an older age as a veteran, just keeping himself in shape and what he was doing. You know, just so many guys that you would just look at now and you'd be like, wow, they were on a different level as far as what they were looking to achieve and compete. Yeah, I mean, I loved every bit of it. I loved Poland. I loved, it was funny, a small story is by the end of my career in Poland, I lived in that small little town of Sopot, and I remember when they were bringing me around and they were showing me all these big apartments and wonderful areas, and I said, no, listen, I want an apartment in walking distance of the practice facility. And I don't know, it hit me as like, you know, you're going to work every day, and I thought to myself, if I could just get up and be able to walk to practice and walk back, it would be great because I wouldn't have to sit there and drive. And it was the nicest experience. I went through town every day, you know, meeting new people, going into little shops, getting, you know, fruit and this, that, and the other, and produce, and just really enjoying that last year of playing. It was, you know, it's funny is after 12 years, you finally figure it out. And you're going, geez, I wish I would have done that every year I was in Europe.
It's a really nice beach at Sopot. It's a really nice stroll along it.
Oh yeah, very nice.
Yeah. I mean, you came to the NBA eventually. I think you were 28 then, and when you joined the Magic in 2002, and I remember coming over to interview at what is now the Amway Arena, and you give me a quote, which I'll read it to you here. When I was asking you about what this was like, you know, against expectation against reality, and you said to me, it's a lot of hard work, and there's a lot of stress involved, which I think will surprise a lot of people who see this as the land of milk and honey when you make it all the way to the NBA. What was the stress level when you look back on that now with a bit of perspective?
I think, first of all, everybody is competitive. There's so many alpha males that are wanting to achieve. When I first got there, you know, I was just coming off, let's say, 30 days with the Tau, my second stint with Dusko Ivanovic there and going up against the training camp. So I came in, I was in great shape. And I was kind of the underdog. People were like, well, who's starting for the Orlando Magic? And that's an exciting experience, you know. First of all, I just was trying to make a team, and then all of a sudden I'm the starting center. And one of the things that became apparent real quick is how professional that league is, because they scouted me very fast. Every team in the league knew 15 foot in, he's got a nice jump. So at 12 games in, whatever it was, I was like obsolete. I couldn't get a shot off. I couldn't do it. They all knew everything about me. And then I go out of the rotation, and you're wanting to be in the rotation, and you want to do as much as you can, but I just couldn't find it, and I lost my confidence. And I remember sitting there, and Tracy McGrady, as good-hearted as he was, he would just go up to me and be like, come on, Pat, get your confidence back. And I'm like, oh, really? Wait, can I just pick it up off the floor? Or is it in my pocket? Or do you have it? Did I leave it in my locker? Because I just can't find it. And you're kind of alone in that regard, and you see the way a lot of players find their way out of the NBA. Because it's not something that it's so easily, you just don't, you know, go to some guru of leadership. The next thing you know, you've talked your way back into finding your confidence. I just couldn't find it.
Was that hard on that team because it was the T-Mac team? Grant Hill was signed, injured. It was one of those great teams that had wonderful expectations, but never remotely lived up to the billing for so many different reasons. Was it a hard environment when, I guess, lots of people within that organization were feeling the heat that year?
They were. I wasn't. If that makes sense. You know, when you're on whatever $14 million a year, and I'm making minimum, I was just happy to be there. So everybody's patting me on the back. I don't have the same pressure. But as far as Doc Rivers then putting a team together, like I wasn't a stranger to the understanding that, hey, when I was with Panathinaikos, I knew we had the most talented team, and that the Giannakopoulos brothers had put together a very large budget to make that team happen. When I made it to the Magic, you know, you've got, God bless him, when you got Sean Kemp, and he's not the Sean Kemp of the Seattle Supersonics, you know, and he's a very large man, and you're looking, okay, here's his third chance back, and, you know, Horace Grant is running like he's welded together by 3 rusty bicycles. You know, you're just like, okay, this is not the dream Magic squad, you know, that made it to the Eastern Conference Finals against Michael Jordan twice. I didn't feel any pressure at all, but I did have an understanding that this was not the best Magic team ever. I think at the time I was pretty much excited that we even made the playoffs against the Pistons.
I mean, your second stint in the NBA, I mean, you go into Phoenix to the Suns, that 7 seconds or less team that lots of people remember with immense fondness. Steve Nash is the MVP in your first year there. Did that seem for you like, coming from Europe, that should have been the perfect fit? Because yours is big. He also likes to shoot the 3 on occasion as well. Coming in, what was the vibe for you at the very outset of joining the Suns?
Well, I knew it was kind of a second chance. So I was like, okay, you know, I'm excited about it. And I went in, I was in great shape. I still had some spring in my step. So I knew that I wasn't coming in, you know, injured with a bad knee and just a jump shot. I was like, all right, I can still go. So how would I say, you're still a little bit shocked when you kind of getting off the plane, you're walking in, you're seeing Steve Nash and Amari and all these guys. So I remember going into practices, and I had never seen an athlete like Amari at the time. I think he's still, in my opinion, the beginning of that hybrid player that you see now. It's, you know, anywhere from like 6'8" to 6'11", you know, thin build, run like a gazelle, vertical. I mean, he had a 40-some inch vertical. He had a 32-inch waist. He was like 6'8", but he had a 7-foot wingspan. And he had 2 hands like Dr. J. So anything around the basket, he's dunking on everybody, and you can't stop him. So it was extremely impressive to see. But I remember I got some advice because, you know, I was a little bit intimidated by him. And I remember Mark Ivaroni was telling me, he's like, look, you go at him every time you can and just do not back down. And once I did, you could see there was a bit of a mental change for him. Like, okay, this guy is, you know, he's coming in strong too. So going into that beginning, we sit down in veterans camp, and I remember Mike D'Antoni had said to everybody, hey guys, listen, here's the first thing I'm going to tell you. If you don't make it up and down the court, you'll never see the ball. Okay, that's number 1. Number 2 is I play about a 7-man roster. So if you don't make it at 7-man, you're probably going to be mother effing me the whole time. He said, but if you do, you're going to be doing pretty good. So there's 14 of us sitting there in that room. We're all thinking we're in the 7 top. Everybody is. So you kind of hear it, but you don't hear it. And then as we started, the 7-man rotation was just, it became such a divide in the locker room that, yeah, it was a great team to be on, but it was also one of those teams that it was an interesting and complex situation because they played so fast, 7 seconds or less, 7-man rotation, and they only made it so far in the playoffs every year. And there was, I went through an interview the other day talking about it. The funny thing was Mike D'Antoni wouldn't talk to the other 7. He wouldn't. It was almost like he was afraid that even if he did talk to him, he wouldn't be able to change the truth of what it was. So why even bother? So towards my second year, yeah, I still good friends with Steve and Amari and Sean, all those guys playing. But the 7 who weren't playing, after a while, it became, a point where it was like you didn't really enjoy it as much.
I mean, when you had that Suns team, they had 17 game winning streak the second year you were there, and there was big championship expectations. Get past the Lakers and Kobe the first round, you face the Spurs in the Western Finals and lose out. But even though you're not part of the rotation, do you sit there and go, there's my chance to win this title that everyone would love to win going away? Or do you sit there going, I don't really feel a part of this, it doesn't hurt as much?
You make the initial agreement, and I think this with everything, with sports, parents signing up for anything. Once you sign in, you've pretty much made it let's say a legal agreement. I worked my tail off to get into the best shape I could. And for months now, in the beginning, after practices, I'm running and jogging on the sideline, and I'm doing all kinds of extra things. And it got to a point where I'm doing it so much, I have people coming up to me and they're like, wow, hey, they're saying really good things in the coaches' meetings about getting you in. And this is fueling me. I'm like, this is exciting. And so I get to a point where it's just not working out. Like I'm not getting any time. And I'll never forget that Steve Nash came down into the practice facility early, and I'm on the sideline doing stuff, and he just turns his head and he's like, I can't even look at you, because it was hurting, because I'm working as hard as I can, but I'm never seeing any playing time. So imagine this. This is the part where I think everybody has a breaking point. I think it was like 4 months into that season, after doing all this stuff, I didn't show up, and I was like, you know what, I'm not going to do the extra running. I'm not going to do the elliptical after the games. I'm just not doing it. If you remember that year, that's when we went to play the San Antonio Spurs. That's where Robert Horry slams Steve Nash into the timetable, and Boris Diaw and Amari step over the line, and they get knocked out of playing. They can't play for the next game. The only active big man they have on the roster at that point, going back to Phoenix, is me. And now I remember, I told you, Mike D'Antoni never talked to anybody outside of those 7. So they haven't even talked to me. Mark Ivoroni is the closest thing I have to any communication to the coaching staff. Alvin Gentry, none of them. So as soon as they get knocked out, it comes up to me, and they start asking me questions like, hey, what have they Boris is going to be knocked out. Mari's wasn't. I just let him have it. I'm like, what am I going to do, sit here and lie? I said, they haven't talked to me in months. I said, I'm the only one active on the roster. I said, but I haven't even been game ready or tested in whatever it was, 5 months of play. And you want us to print this? And I'm like, what do you want me to do? And they started asking me, and again, I wasn't trying to cut my throat, but I cut my throat pretty good. They asked me, they said, well, who do you think is the better coach, Greg Popovich or Mike D'Antoni? And I said, well, who's won championships? And they said, well, Pop has. I said, whose rotation's working and whose is not working? I said, last 2 years I've been here, We go down 7-man rotation, and then we always have these injuries, and we can't make it through. Popovich has got a 10-man rotation over there, and he knows how to get guys ready in case something happens. So it's an obvious situation. And so, anyways, they print this. The next day I get home, and my agent calls me, and he says, "Hey, are you trying to get kicked out of the league?" And I said, "No, what do you want me to say? Like, you sit there and lie?" And Brian Colangelo, who was in Toronto at the time, he calls my agent laughing, and he's like, "Is Pat trying to get kicked out of the league over there?" And I'm like, "No." So then this is another story probably for another time, but the next year, after that year's over, Steve Kerr is the GM of the team, and Steve Nash is calling me, and he's like, "Hey, it'd be great if you came back." And I said, "Hey, man, I don't think they're going to bring me back." I call up Steve Kerr to apologize, and I want to let him know that I am a team player and this and the other. And Mark, I sat there and I ate a shit sandwich for a good 30 minutes apologizing. And at the very end, Steve Kerr is like, "Well, Pat, I really appreciate you calling and apologizing." And so they said, "Well, we're going to move in a different direction." And I was like, "Then why didn't you tell me 15 minutes ago?"
Welcome to the NBA.
Welcome to the NBA.
I know you, like all of us, have been watching The Last Dance, and much as we're all filtering it through the eyes of the Michael Jordan and the greatness of what he did. What's been interesting, I think, for me is that dynamic that existed between him and everyone else. And, you saw the last edition, Steve Kerr, of all people, talking about, the respect that he had to get of Jordan and how those role players were often ignored, cast out, that people like Scott Burrell were pushed extra hard so they were ready. Is that an odd experience, or was that your experience where you had nice guys? I mean, Steve Nash, a great guy, Amari Stoudemire, a great guy, Sean Marion, likewise, but you have to adjust to a hierarchy in the NBA, which, although it exists in Europe, is not probably quite at the same level.
Yes and no. I think that, what we're seeing in The Last Dance is with alpha males, there's always a check. It's if you've got 12 people on your roster, you're going to want 12 of the most hard-nosed, competitive guys who have got a good head on their shoulders. They're smart enough to know the plays and the defensive concepts and all these things. When there's a little bit of wiggle inside of somebody's competitive, you're going to always kind of push them. And Michael Jordan at the level he is at is, in my opinion, the best player ever. I think it's under a bigger magnifying glass. It's like, oh, well, what was he doing? It's like, well, he wasn't doing anything that anybody else isn't doing all the time. I mean, we could go to the lowest team in the league in Poland or in Taiwan or whatever. I don't care where it's at. And they're still going to have guys that are pushing each other, or on a girls team, they're pushing each other to be better. And so it's a little unfair that they're Steve Kerr and Michael Jordan. I guarantee you that happened with Steve Kerr and someone else on the team. So it wasn't just Michael Jordan was, just influencing that much. I know Michael Jordan's drive to win was huge, but I think I think that happens with, any team that's looking to compete. Like, no one's there to be the last place team or to be halfway. They want to be the champions. So I don't know if that makes sense. I just think that they kind of look at it in a light as if Michael Jordan was pushing them that much. Well, doesn't everybody? I get up this morning and I'm talking to my kids about, getting their homework done and checking their tests. And I'm questioning what their other motives are. I didn't sit there and punch them in the chest.
There's a while to go in this lockdown. Hold on.
Yeah, right.
The Irish national team. I mean, you took a while to make that senior international debut. Why did it really take so long?
I played with the Irish team through the World University Games. So I already had some strong bonds with some of the players that were playing. And when I started playing professionally, I guess there's a little bit of a mixture of like, there's my own concern, like, oh, I don't want to get hurt, and I don't want to mess around with my professional career. And then there was a little bit of, well, it's the Irish basketball, and is it really at a level where we're going to be able to compete? So that played out for a couple of years, especially when I was on Panathinaikos. Like I would get the manager of the team would come up to me and he'd be very irritated, as if, a gnat was circling his head. I get these Irish guys off me. They keep calling about to come play for the team. And I was like, well, let me talk to them. So after I was back from the Magic. Spirited group, and we're going to be playing for something we all believe in and love. I was like, you know what? I want to look into this. And so I did. And that's when I made a decision. I was like, I want to play again. And so when I went over and started playing, I was very excited to be a part of it again.
Was it nice to go back? Because it was like, I remember writing about the time, there was a lot of sort of hoopla about you coming back, the local boy made good. Was it nice to feel that appreciation from whence you came?
Oh, yeah. Going back, and I remember my family, the Irish that were living in the United States, and of course my Irish family living in Ireland. When we got together at that time, whether it was for a sing song after the games or before this and the other, it's funny. It's like, there's moments you have in your life where just everything seems like this is the way I remember growing up, and this is the joy that we experienced before I had stress of bills and kids and all this stuff. It was like getting back to that. And then when I would go practice and I'd have, Ireland on my chest, there's a great sense of pride and honor inside of that, and then, when you arrive somewhere, you arrive to another country and you're about to play, it's not like playing for anything else. It wasn't like, having the Panathinaikos logo or Phoenix Suns. It was something totally, not to sound strange, but it was more pure in the sense of why I was playing.
Having been back, and you're back to do some work with the kids in the regional academies, what was your impression? Do you, without using excuses, do you see the green shoots there that can lead to the next Pat Burke arriving in the NBA?
I definitely see a big advantage in what Ireland is doing. If I can, I'll share an experience I had with you. When I retired, came back and started working in America, there is a how would I say it? There's an influence in America here to get what you want almost by yourself. So the short road to success is if I just take the ball and try to score myself, I get all the glory for it. But in the meantime, you don't realize the chaos you're creating with your teammates, that you're not passing the ball. So there's an element of selfishness in American players that it's not spoken. It's just the way it is. And when I went to Ireland a couple of years ago, I went to see the academy, where I think there was, I want to say 250 boys, I think around 15, and 250 girls. And Mark, I'm sitting there and I'm watching them play. Now, I promise you this, I just walk in, I'm watching them, and I don't see an argument. I don't see any fussing. I don't see anybody challenging the referees. I don't see any disrespect to coaches. If somebody falls down, players are running to pick them up. And I sat there. Now, the only time I've ever seen something like that is when you're at a tryout for a very high level. And I started looking around the gym we were in, like, who's here that they're competing, for. And my good friend Niall Barry, who's a part of Basketball Ireland, he's like, nobody. This is the way we play. And I'm telling you, it was like a punch in the head. And I sat there and I was delighted. I was like, this is the most beautiful representation of sports I've seen in a long time. And I'm just off the plane watching Americans argue with their coaches, yelling at refs, parents acting up. Now, I'm not to say that doesn't happen everywhere, but at a very high level in the United States. And to see what was going on in Ireland, I was like, this is wonderful. Like, anybody who's looking to create a great team for their company, for sports, whatever, they're looking for people who not only have the skill sets, but the people who have the head on the shoulders, that with the emotional management, the idea that they can think clearly, they're open-minded. And this is what I was seeing. So I said, Ireland's on track. Ireland is on track, because if they can do this, they're going to start to produce something that people are going to go, you know what? We got a couple of Irish players on our team and they're settling this. We got a couple of Irish people that came in. And that to me will be the testimonials that are going to start to occur.
Let's finish off with the NBA. And so you're in Orlando. You're not that far from the Disney complex that the NBA is talking about restarting and as a sort of central venue after coronavirus. If you're a player just now, if you were in this league, what would your gut feeling be about going back to play, maybe being isolated away from your family for weeks on end to make this happen? Would it sit easily with you, or would you be very nervous, as a lot of players in different sports are, about venturing back out again?
I don't think I would be nervous. It's funny is watching the television program we're talking about, The Last Dance. You're seeing these guys so physically fit. They're just, they're like soldiers. And I can remember at that time when I was like that, you just feel like you're untouchable. Like you can't, you're the fit of health, that nothing's going to harm you or hurt you. And I think that's what these players have. I don't think they're looking at it going, how can't wait to compete. There's a hunger inside of that. So if the Orlando thing does happen, it'll be very interesting. But I don't think it's going to have any type of delay because the players don't want it. Maybe the owners, because of the investment they have in such very large financial contracts. But I don't see it being slowed down by the athletes. But I do see it by management. Logistics alone have got to be just insane. I can't even imagine being staff members trying to put that all together, But if it does come, that would be very exciting.
Well, Pat, we wish you obviously continued health for you and your family, and continued success in whatever you're doing. It's been always a great seeing your career and catching up. But thanks so much for joining us on the MVP cast today.
Yeah. Well, anytime you want. Hopefully the next time we talk, we're outside of this pandemic.
And having a beer in an actual pub.
I look forward to the next time we meet up.
Will do. Thank you, Pat. That's it for this edition of the MVP Cast, brought to you in association with Total Environmental Compliance. You can check out their website at tecompliance.co.uk. All our previous editions, of course, available at mvp247.com, or you can get them via your preferred podcast provider. And please leave us a review if you can. We've got some more great editions coming up very soon. But for me, Mark Woods, it's bye for now.